You say in the book, our fight, you're talking about the people who are opposing Netanyahu's efforts and his allies' efforts. Our fight was to ensure Israel remains a liberal democracy. I guess when I look at Israel, and again, I look at it as an outsider, not as an insider, as you do. So I have a particular vantage point, which is necessarily limited. Israel looks to me like a pretty robust liberal democracy for Jews, although I could understand that there's fears of backsliding. But it doesn't look to me like a liberal democracy for Palestinians. Most Palestinians under Israeli control don't have citizenship, the right to vote for the government that has control over their lives. And even the minority of Palestinians who do have citizenship have a second-class form of citizenship. So that doesn't look to me, it looks like a liberal democracy for one ethno-religious group, one, and not for another.
I understand why you might say that, and I think that the occupation, the military occupation is of the West Bank is something that has to be ended. And I think that many for as long as I've been alive, from my days in the youth movement of Hashomer Hatzair, which is a socialist Zionist youth movement, till the present day, I've protested and fought to end the occupation. And there have been times where we thought we were succeeding, and then there are times where we unfortunately failed. But I do think that, racism exists in every country. I don't need to tell you about the racism in the United States
Sure.
and the way that democracy has been curtailed across the American South and other areas of the United States where the government has used its policies to be able to reduce the ability of people to access voting, let alone policing rates and incarceration rates and so on. So I think that there's a difference here between the ideal and the real. And while I am very respectful of those people who would say that we need to continually strive towards the ideal, is what I believe in. I do think that we need to acknowledge that in Israel, those citizens of Israel across all backgrounds, even those Bedouins who live in unrecognized towns, which I personally think is a travesty that are continually unrecognized, that need to be acknowledged, that need to be brought in more fully into Israeli society. Every one of them has access to universal health care. Every single one of them has access to Israel's social welfare network. Every one of them has the ability and the right to vote, and they do vote. And when they vote, they have representatives in the Knesset. So I think that it's a much more complex issue. But again, I'm happy. I think on our own time we can have these conversations. I have my own politics, but that's not my role here. My role here is to provide a little bit of a introduction to that community in Israel that I believe is our best hope for building a better Israel, for building the opportunity for a Palestinian state to live in peace beside us. And I think that it's important for your audience to get to know this community and to see what we can learn from it and how we can dialogue with it. And I think that building that begins on recognition and understanding of the narratives that they experience.
Yes, and I believe the narrative is important. I mean, the conversation is important, which is why I wanted to do this. But I feel part of the conversation is pushing a little back a little bit against some of the assumptions that don't are not entirely convincing to me. So, to me, there is, it seems to me, a contradiction between the idea of liberal democracy, which for me is, as is its root, the idea of equality under the law, a state that treats people equally, irrespective of their race, religion, ethnicity, and the idea of a state that has a special obligation to members of one ethnic, racial, or religious group. If someone in the United States said, Donald Trump said tomorrow, we're going to make America a Christian and democratic state, I think me and most Jews and many Muslims and others would say, we see a contradiction there. To me, I do see a contradiction between the idea of liberal democracy and the idea of a Jewish state, a state that has a special obligation to Jews when again, roughly half the people under Israeli control are not Jews, and even 20% of Israel's citizens are not Jews.
I understand that. Do you believe the same thing for Greece, which has a national religion as well as a national church, or England, in which the head of state is also the head of the church? Or, I mean, my point is to say that,
Yeah.
or the United States, which is clearly a Christian country, a country in which, in order for people to be able to participate in it, they have to abide by the Christian rhythms of life. I grew up
Yeah.
New York City. I grew up, in Lower Manhattan, under the poverty line, Israeli. artist parents who came and benefited from rent control. And I did not for 1 second believe that I lived in a non-Christian country. And so I hear you, but I think
Yeah.
that again, it's the difference between the ideal and the real. Would I love for Israel to be to be more egalitarian in
Mhm.
every way, that every person between the river and the sea has equal rights, each within their own political
Mhm.
polity? Absolutely, no question. But and I think that most of the people in my book would say the same thing. I think all of them actually would say the same thing. And I think that the question for us, for you, for me, for the people that are listening or reading is how do we improve the world that we're in? How do we work with allies who understand the importance of liberal democracy, who come from a place where we understand that the real is only the beginning and the future is something that we build together? And how do we build those alliances in order to push that forward? And I think that the mistake that happens when those voices are flattened, when
Mhm.
Israel is seen as something that is outside of the pale of liberal democracy, as opposed to imperfect like every other place, is
Mhm.
that we all lose from the ability to work together in order to improve the world we live in.
Right. But I think Israel is outside the pale of liberal democracy, which is why Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, the UN have all called it an apartheid state because it is a state in which there is everywhere between the river and the sea, although manifesting in different ways, a clear legal hierarchies between Jews and Palestinians. In the most extreme form in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, where most Palestinians don't even have citizenship, right?
Well, wait, I need to stop you there, Peter, because you know very well that in East Jerusalem they can become citizens and
No,
they choose not to.
that's not
Yes,
true.
they can.
Palestinians can
Well,
apply. No, no. Let Palestinians can apply to become
Peter,
citizens. Let
Peter,
Palestinians can, and most, and oh, go ahead.
Peter,
Go ahead.
no, I hear you. I hear you. I really don't think that it's something for us to litigate right now. Neither you nor I are going to get to a place where we agree. And I think that that's not the point of this book. My book isn't a polemic. It's not making an argument.
But
What
it
it's
is making
doing
an
is,
argument.
what
It
it's doing
starts
is
with the argument that Israel is a liberal democracy and that we should support those who are fighting to preserve it as a liberal democracy. I'm questioning the premise.
Mhm, I understand.
And you're right. It is a small question about whether Palestinians who apply for citizenship in East Jerusalem mostly get it. My understanding is they mostly don't get it. But the point I would make is that if the reason that I think Israel has been classified as an apartheid state is this clear legal supremacy of one group over another, which in there's a difference between having a Christian society as we have in the United States, because the vast majority of people are Christian, and an explicitly Christian state which has laws which privilege Christians over non-Christians. In the UK, you could say that the Anglican Church and its role in the head of state has an element of that, but it's much, much, much less extreme. It's than what you have in Israel, right? Where you have, again, most Palestinians don't even have citizenship in the state in which they live.
Well,
And
I think that
yes,
I think that again, we're getting into a territory that every state has its own complexities.
sure.
Racism and the primacy of one group over another exists everywhere. The United States of America is a white Christian nation, and people have been saying that and fighting against that for quite some time. But that's what it is, and
What
that's
do you
why
mean by,
and that
go ahead.
it's a
Sorry,
white,
go
it's the
ahead.
United States, it's a white Christian nation. You have a minister of war now, the secretary of war now that has it tattooed onto his skin. I mean, we can talk about extremism in every country.
Mhm.
Greece is a wonderful example of that.
Mhm.
Spain, which is not allowing the Catalans to have their autonomy, moving immigrants into Catalan to ensure that they don't get autonomy. The Basques. I mean, we can go place to place.
Well, let's
Let
do that.
alone
Let's
countries.
talk about those places and compare them to Israel.
Well, the point that I'm making is that those conversations are conversations that should be had. That's not the conversation that I think that you and I should be having, just because I think that your readers and your listeners care deeply about liberal democracy, both in the United States and in Israel.
Yeah.
They care deeply to ensure that Palestinians between the river and the sea have equal rights. They care that their lives have dignity. It's what I care about too. But I think that what your readers have unfortunately not had access to is to understand who those people are. What is it that drives them? What do they care about? What are they fighting for? And I think that while the black and whiteness of the current moment, where people polarize to the edges, and either you agree with me or you disagree with me, is very appealing. That's not what I'm trying to do here, and I don't think that it's worth spending our conversation on relitigating things that are constantly, yelled about in the press.
I certainly don't want to be yelling, but I do think there is an assumption at the core of your book, as I understand it. Tell me if I'm wrong, right? That Israel is a liberal democracy, and you want to center the voices of people who are fighting to preserve Israel as a liberal democratic Jewish state. And the question I'm asking is this possible, or is there a contradiction there? It seems to me that Israel is in a very different situation than Spain. Catalans and Basques have Spanish citizenship, right? Spain does not have an equivalent of the Israel Land Authority, where the vast majority of land is controlled by a parastate institution that gives almost half its seats to the Jewish National Fund, right? So that the vast majority of the land is allocated by an institution, in part by an institution, specifically for the purposes of one ethno-religious group. I do think that's very different than what you see in Spain, or what you do or the fact that Pete Hegseth, who I loathe, has a Christian tattoo, right? Hegseth and Trump may be wanting to move America towards being a Christian state, and we're fighting them with everything we have because we don't want America to be a Christian state, because we don't believe that states that give supremacy to one ethnic religious group is compatible with the principle of liberal democracy, and you seem to think they are.
I hear you. And so the 13 million Native Americans who live under occupation in your land on reservations, and the Puerto Ricans who do not have the same right of representation, and the Hawaiians whose kingdom was taken from them and continues to be occupied, and Papua New Guinea. I mean, Peter, we can go at this all day. I mean,
I'm happy to talk about
America
those. Let's talk about those cases.
but my point is that that's not the point, because I believe, and this is, I think, where we differ, but I think it's really important to emphasize it. I believe that the world is imperfect. It's broken. It's
I
broken
agree.
everywhere we look.
Yes.
Racism and power politics are problematic anywhere you look. The best we can do is to strengthen those who are fighting for the good and fighting to create the world that we want. And we have a very limited time on this world. We have the ability to spend our time focusing on fixing or on tearing down. And in my particular case, and the people in the book, all of which are involved and invested in fixing, it's to try to make it better, not to return to what Israel was before January 4th, 2023, to recognize that the policies that the Netanyahu regime has held over us over the past 17 years has made life worse, to try to return to a path that Rabin, before he was assassinated, was working towards. But for us to be able to get there, there's a lot of work for us to do. And I think that one of the mistakes that I keep on seeing from very well-meaning people who
Mhm.
care deeply about the soul of the Jewish people is that they don't recognize what they're doing in many ways by silencing and flattening the narratives of those people who are seeking to do that work, who are our best hope, is
Mhm.
that they're actually making it harder for them to do that work. And so the question is, how can we, because we're people who care about the soul of the Jewish people and about what the Jewish people does, how can we support the important work that needs to happen?